Hello, everybody. This is your host, Betsy Wurzel of Chatting with Betsy, a Passionate World Talk Radio Network, where our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guests may not represent those of the host or the station. Folks, you're going to want to listen to my guest today. Do you want to know how to age well? Do you admire people like Clint Eastwood who's aged well? Well, with me today is Dr. Max Fuhrmann, who is an aging expert. He's an author. He's a Ph.D., ABPP, who specializes in Geropsychology, has extensive experience in the assessment and psychotherapeutic treatment of older adults. And I want to thank, so I don't forget, his publicist, Cherie Keir, who is founder and president of Keir PR and executive prof. Hope I said that right. Welcome, Dr. Max Fuhrmann, to Chatting with Betsy. So excited to have you with me today.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm pleased to be here.
Oh, thank you. I've watched you on YouTube, and I love what you have to say. And what caught my eye when I saw the press release was about how you can age well, how someone like Clint Eastwood is aging very well. I think he's 90 or 91. I saw his latest
91,
movie, actually. Yeah. 91. Cry Macho. I saw that with my son. And, you know, he looks great. I mean, you could tell that he's aged, but I'm telling you, he's still spry. And, you know, to direct a movie and act in a movie at that age, I mean, he probably started that maybe when he was 88 or 90. But what's his secret? Do you know what his secret is, or what's the secret to be like that at that age?
Okay. Well, one of the secrets that a lot of people don't like to hear about is you pick your ancestors well. When Clint Eastwood won his first Academy Award for directing, his mother was in the audience, and he's commented, despite how tough, kind of rough he can be, that meant so much to him that she was there, and she was almost 100. So the longevity has a lot to do with role models also. If you have a parent that lives into their hundreds, right, you obviously know, like, that you can potentially do this. And I was curious, you said you went with your son. What does your son think of seeing somebody who's 91 in this film, if any of you have seen Cry Macho, where he rides a horse and he lies like on this kind of wooden bench, whatever. He's driving. I mean, he's doing a lot of things that many people in their 90s, we don't think that they would be able to do. What did your son think about that?
Well, my son thought it was terrific. He said, Mom, he looks a little, older, but my mom is 91. He goes, Clint Eastwood's the same age as Grandma. And my mom is pretty good for her age. I have to say that. I mean, good genes do run in my family, but
obviously, And so I was asking what your son thought, because this is a lot about aging well, right? Is when we watch media, television commercials, we tend to see the opposite. Grumpy old people, right, with walkers and help I can't, get up, I've fallen, this kind of imagery. So when you grow up watching something like, here's a 91-year-old man who can do all these things, you're not as likely to have a negative view of yourself. So when you have problems like a pain in your shoulder, and let's say that you're even 81 or 71, you're less likely to think, it's part of aging. You're going to go to the doctor and say there's something going on with my arm because the other side is the same age and it feels fine. So my job as a geropsychologist often is to empower older adults to feel like, even Clint Eastwood, one of his quotes recently was, that I really love what I'm doing. Why would I retire? Retire from what? And having something to get up to and do and believe that you can still do it. He's also quoted as saying he believes that he can do a lot of this better than he used to in terms of conceptualizing what he wants to make in a film, right, coming up with new ideas. And this particular screenplay was presented to him, Cry Macho, like 20 years or something ago, or maybe more than that, and he said he was too young to do the part at that time. So even having something on the back burner for people saying, when I get older, I'll be able to do that, versus our culture says, well, as you get older, you can do less. So that's a lot of the secret is attitude.
Dr. Max, you said something interesting, like the image of an older person. Now, when I was 16 and 17, I worked in a nursing home. And back then, in 1974, 75, people were in their 60s there, 65 and up, and they looked old. And here I am, 64, and I'm no way ready to go into a care home, a nursing facility, or assisted living. So I think baby boomers are aging much better, and we're really going to change the way that we want to be taken care of versus the other generations. We don't want to be warehoused into these big, large facilities.
Right, and part of that is planning for the future. How are you going to, quote, age into the future? Expectations. I would say people are aging at a slower rate. We see this even in young people, right, that they're still living at home, like up until 30 years old sometimes because of financial reasons. But Paul McCartney's, Beatles song, When I'm 64, that came out when you and I, about the same age, as kids, and no one was shocked by 64, right? That's not old, but it was old for that time. Now Paul McCartney is almost 80, and he's the one who wrote that song about being 64. So our image also of what one can do as we get older, I'm hoping has changed. And yet I find, certainly I live in Southern California, and the kind of mecca of anti-aging, staying young forever, we still have this image that the best way to look is under 30. And this was another thing with Clint Eastwood. People were saying, you don't look like you did when you were 20, as if that's a big criticism of him. And he says, so what? And I know that there can be different standards for how women are allowed to look as they, quote, grow older. But the bottom line here for all your listeners is you are the age that you are, right? Embrace it. It's not all negative. It's not that you're losing everything. You acquire wisdom. You acquire experience. And during this end of the year period, a chance for you to be there for your family to help them continue to cope with this pandemic and to be there with all their issues, their job issues, their relationship issues. You have so much to share. And this warehousing kind of older adults implies that they're not really of meaning anymore. You just don't see that in many places in the world.
Right. And, it's amazing how different cultures really appreciate the wisdom of their elders. I worked with someone who I did work with someone who was from the Indian culture. And it was her birthday, so her mother lived in India. And she said, Miss Betsy, may I give you the blessing, or can I get the blessing from you? And she bent down to my shoes and did, her ritual. And she goes, we respect the older people. And, I was quite honored, since her mom wasn't around, that she chose me,
right.
To be that elder.
Yeah, because again, even the concept of an elder, in some Native American cultures, you wouldn't ask a person for advice or their opinion until they had their first wrinkle. And we put Botox under our skin to get rid of it. And you see around the world this idea that as people get older, they are a source of great support to the family, versus here that, they're going to go live in assisted living or a board and care home or live alone in isolation and not really be part of the family itself. And that's contributing a lot to why we have so much depression and anxiety in older adults in Western countries.
Yes, especially with the pandemic that has happened with the isolation, and, it's very depressing. My mom, at 91, she was 90 when the pandemic happened, couldn't have her 90th birthday party. She was very active, plays mahjong 2-3 times a week. She was volunteering in a hospital, and then, everything shut down, and you could tell that, it does take a toll. And then, unfortunately, my brother died January of this year. And so that took a lot, out of her. And you could tell that. But my mom's a tough cookie, and her mom was a tough cookie. My grandmother went into a nursing home at 90, only taking aspirin. That was it.
Yeah, well, they say that you have the longevity, and this is part of the planning. I'm sorry, I live down the street from a fire station, if you're hearing some of that the issue is that when you have this image, right, of living a long time, then you think about how you're going to plan for that. If you come from a family where people die in their 60s and 70s, that's a very different trajectory for you, meaning if you haven't figured out kind of what you want to do about your 50s, you kind of need to get at it. But if you have these people in your family that live into their 90s, you certainly, Betsy, have a shot at 100 from all the things that we study. And so that can give you a mindset of, am I doing right now in my 60s what I want to be doing? I have time literally for a whole other career. You bring up the concept, too, that how the pandemic's been really hard on seniors. I think another way that we don't really honor older adults, I'll just pick on the United States, is we see them as not very adaptive. We see them as set in their ways. And I always say that it's the young who are set in their ways, When my grandson is threatened if he doesn't behave with all his electronics being taken away, that's terrifying to him. He can't imagine that, at like 10 years old. What would he do without his cell phone or his tablet or something? You and I never had that growing up. So we could adjust to that even at our age, correct?
Right, that's right. Yes.
So when older adults are confronted with a pandemic or something, they're the ones who actually can adjust to it. They've lived through, right? Some of them, Pearl Harbor, they lived through the polio epidemic, they've lived through all kinds of civil unrest and technological changes. I have clients in their 90s that have learned how to play mahjong online since this pandemic.
Wow.
And that likely they would not have done that without the pandemic, but they wanted to stay connected to people, so they're doing it. Even all the therapy that I do virtually now online, my oldest client is 91. The average age of my clients is about 80, and they do this. They figure out how to do it on their cell phone or their computer because they want to. They're motivated to do it. And again, our stereotype is seniors are set in their ways, right? And I always say it's like in nature, you either adapt or you die. So I was going to segue, actually, this book that I have coming out in the beginning of next year is just about that. It's about how some of my clients have really, really adapted in a resilient way to the pandemic. Much better, I think, than the average younger person might have.
Yes, the name of your book is Schmandemic. I love the name of that. Coming out.
Yeah, we came up with that, my co-author and I, and then I saw they were saying that on Broadway, that when they were reopening Broadway in New York City, they were saying, Pandemic, Schmandemic, here we are again. So they stole our line. But it's more the idea that it's not that big a deal the older that you are. You've been through all kinds of losses, all kinds of changes, and you either adapt or you're not alive anymore. And so this is just another example. I mean, the seniors, it was a blow to them if they were volunteering, right? If they were around other people physically, if they couldn't have a birthday, if they couldn't even go to a funeral, all these sort of things. But my point, certainly in doing this work almost 40 years, is don't underestimate them. They're the ones who figure stuff out. Young people often haven't been through a lot of things, so they're the ones that you're reading about that have the higher substance abuse since the pandemic, higher suicide rate, domestic violence, child abuse, all this stuff. The younger you are, it's much harder for you to cope with things because you haven't been alive long enough to learn how to do that.
That's right. I adjusted. The pandemic, to me, one thing I was grateful for, Dr. Max, was it forced me to stay home and rest, which I needed. Because I was a caregiver for my husband for 10 years, and he died on New Year's Day, 2020. So I really took advantage of the pandemic to recuperate. And, in my 60s, actually is when I found my power, my voice, and my gifts. So it's never, too late. I feel more alive and vibrant at 64 than I did, I think, in my 40s, because I'm more confident in who I am. I know who I am now. And
think of the things that you've been through. And probably in your 30s, if someone had told you you're going to feel this way in your 60s, you would have said, really? Really?
Yes. Yeah, that's very, very true. Never would I have thought I would be a podcaster. I didn't even know what a podcast was 3 years ago. So, you just never know. I listened to this guy in the business news, and he said, if you retire at 65, if you live to 90, what are you going to do with all that time? So, if you can, try to work as long as you can. Might even want to change careers. You might even want to do something else with your time. And, there's always ways to be productive throughout your life.
Earlier that it's a kind of antiquated concept to think, you're old at 65. You get Medicare still at 65. You can get Social Security at 62. And that really, I think, needs to be updated, because I've worked with so many people that are depressed and anxious because they have nothing to do. They're hoping, that this is going to be great, and after 6 months, they're like, what can I do? This is a line from Bob Hope, the old comedian. What can I do to get my brain going again? Because he worked right up until he died in his 90s, and a lot of celebrities that certainly are not working for the money, they need to keep working, and they'll say, because they want to have something to feel like they're contributing, like they have a purpose.
Right,
and
a purpose,
if it's good for them, right, why isn't that the same for other people? Because this idea of just retiring and doing nothing all day, and it leads again to problems in your relationships, like even with your spouse or partner, that you're alone together too much, and you're just feeling like life is passing you by. And so I believe that we should really update a lot of this to being about 75 is when people should look to retire. Obviously, if they're physically unwell, it's not a good idea to work that long. But just as you're a great example, right, look at all the energy and ebullience that you have at this age, doing new things that you never even knew were possible. Why wouldn't that be the case for other people, correct? Even after doing something like being a caregiver and learning about that in ways that you didn't know maybe 20 years ago, then you bring that into a whole new job.
Yes. Oh, definitely. I run a caregiving group, and I'm like, find a purpose, because when your loved one's journey is over, you need something to do. And even while you are caregiving, try to find something to do. I was very, very fortunate to have met the station manager. She happened to see one of my videos, and that's how I got into podcasting, Jeannie White, the station manager. And it gave me a purpose when my husband was dying. And when he was dying, I was doing my shows because I had to have my mind off, just to have something else to focus on. It was a lifesaver for me, having a purpose. So definitely.
And also being able to do that, right? Being able to transition into doing that. Yes.
Can you tell us more about your book, Pandemic, Schmandemic, what it's about, where people can buy it, when it's coming out, if you know?
Okay, we're hopeful we get all the pieces together for it to come out in just a few weeks here. We're at the end of the year. And it's 5 standalone stories, my other 2 books that you can find on Amazon, and they're listed on my website, the Age Well, Dr. Max. It's all one word, drmax.com. Pandemic, Schmandemic is very much like the other books in that you can just read like one story and kind of put it down. These are composites of my clients, and just to kind of give you a little bit of an example of what I'm talking about, like a woman that loses her spouse in the beginning of the pandemic to COVID. So this is March of 2020, and they've been married, like almost 70 years. I always say I never feel older when I work with older adults because some of them have been married longer than I've been alive. And she's not able to have any sort of service for him or even a burial for him. She's locked in the house in this quarantine. She's been exposed to COVID. And you'd think, wow, this is really dire. This is unprecedented, right? Because when people have someone die, we encourage them to be around people, to get physical support, to get hugs, to be in a support group. And she couldn't do any of that. And this is like just falling off a cliff sort of thing of like, how would one even support a person through this? Well, what she really was able to do was kind of like you're saying. She had been a caregiver for her husband before he died of COVID. He had other health-related problems. He probably contacted COVID from being in healthcare settings, which a lot of seniors have done in the beginning of the pandemic. They were so ill, they were having to go and have procedures or surgeries and whatnot. And then they were around the COVID before we understood a lot about it. So what I saw in this woman is this ability to rest in the beginning of this, to kind of find what she wanted to now do, that she was alone. And very much like you, she's now become a great support and inspirational speaker for other people. And this was a very shy, kind of timid person before all this happened. So this is one example of people in my book where in the beginning of the pandemic you would think, wow, they have a history of depression, anxiety, they're quite frail, they're not doing well. And then because of this traumatic kinds of things that they go through with the isolation, not being able to touch people, not being able to be with their families physically, they go on and do things, sort of like your story, that they didn't think that they would have ever done or would be possible to do. And so what I'm hoping is the readers feel inspired from this.
Yes, I was shy too. I was very shy. Never did I think I would be publicly speaking, Dr. Max. When I started doing videos in my car, like I think 5 or 6 years ago, people would say, "Oh, Betsy, you're brave," and I went, "No, I'm not brave. I was mad. I was had to use my anger in a positive way because of how we were treated." But it had nothing to do with bravery. I was just had to let my anger out. And, it's just, the pandemic, the isolations really affected those who are in facilities, those who have dementia. I know many, they have not seen their loved ones, and then they did see them, and such a change, in a year and a half.
Yeah, but I'm always the one who tries to find the silver lining, if only in like a comedic way, that people who are in mid-stage dementia, and just so the audience knows that there's many forms of dementia, and Alzheimer's disease is the one most people hear about, but we're not even sure how to diagnose that at this point. We used to think we could, but we're not really sure anymore. But one of the saving graces, as it were, of being demented is that you only live in the moment. So I think if you're in mid-stage dementia during this pandemic, you're not remembering how long it's been since you've seen your loved ones. And you may be upset because you thought that it's been a really long time, but it may not have been. And you're easily redirected typically onto something else versus people who have really good memory who could say, wow, it's been a year and a half since I saw my daughter or my grandchildren. They're agonizing about that or remembering like losing their spouse. As time goes on with dementia, you can see this in videos of Tony Bennett, who likely has something like Alzheimer's disease. He's not upset that he can't remember that he just gave a great concert. So I don't think that it's actually been as hard on the demented people as on the people who have good memory or certainly taken care of someone with dementia when all of the facilities, these day facilities, abruptly shut down. That was really hard on the caregivers to have the people be at home. I've had a number of clients that was really traumatic for them. But again, they're resourceful. Right. They've found a workaround. They use community resources. They did online support group with people. They used other volunteers. And this is my point is, give seniors a chance. They're usually much better at figuring out workarounds than younger folks. Because they also, I think, have lower expectations. We don't expect to feel 100% well when we're older. We don't expect to have easy solutions to difficult problems. We don't expect that things will all be fixed. We learn how to cope with things, and that's kind of now with this pandemic, right? We're not over it. Yeah.
That's
and the
right.
seniors, I think, are better at accepting that, actually, than younger adults, I believe.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's very true. I agree 100%. You learn to be adaptable. If you're a caregiver, you have to learn to adapt or you're going to drive yourself crazy. And you learn to just go with the flow, which is what I keep trying to tell my son. Things change. Things are constantly changing. Nothing remains the same, and you have to you learn to go with the flow. And I've really have changed so much with my caregiving journey with my husband that, I'm very grateful for it, of the change that's happened within me. But you are terrific, Dr. Max Fuhrmann.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on, and I really want to encourage people to go on your website, www.agewelldrmax.com, and there they'll see videos, interviews that you've done about your books. They want to order, your other books and your new book. I really would like to encourage the audience to check out Dr. Max because you will not be disappointed. He's a phenomenal speaker.
Thank you, Betsy.
You're welcome. I had to tell the audience, I went on YouTube and I saw Dr. Max's podcast, Age Well, with Dr. Max. It's on YouTube. They are, I think 2 years old, but the information still stands for today. People can use that information today. I do believe that. I thought it was excellent. And when I watched it, I said, I got more excited. I said, oh, good, Dr. Max is coming to my show. I can't wait to talk to him.
This is great, right? Aging can be exciting.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not all negative, right? It can be exciting.
It's not negative. And I tell young people, I go, you know what? Enjoy your youth. But I feel that the older I get, the faster the time goes. I don't even know where the day goes. And I am busy being with the podcast. I've learned how to do emails, learning to get a little more tech savvy, getting there. And it keeps my mind going, reading books and just, doing a lot of reading and talking to people. It does keep my mind active, which is very important.
And that, again, is part of aging well, is doing challenging things. Right? When you're working with the people in the nursing homes years ago, right, they were pretty dormant. They were bedbound or they were sitting around. We used to think that was a good way to age. Now we know it's the opposite. Challenge yourself. Push yourself. You can learn new things if you want to. But so many people think, I'm old and I can't figure that out. And then younger people say, okay, I'll help you with it. Instead of that you can figure things out if you want to.
Yes.
And that's part of what my book is about, too, is these people that, have not been using a lot of technology, and now with the pandemic, they are. They are, amazingly so. And then they find out about it, and they're like, oh, okay, I can play Mahjong, on my tablet, and so maybe I can do FaceTime with my grammar school friends. And so they're doing that. They're reconnecting with people around the world, actually, online in ways that they had not done before the pandemic.
Yes, I think the pandemic has put more people into technology, using Zoom, FaceTime, and, the telemedicine and things like that. But, when I think of older people working, Betty White, George Burns, when, he was he 100 when he died? I don't remember, or close to it.
Yeah, he was right around 100, and he's always the person I talk about in terms of your genetics. That George Burns was known as a drinker and a smoker of cigars, right? He drank his martinis, he smoked cigars. And he was an age contemporary of Jack LaLanne, who many of you remember was like this exercise guru person who gave up sugar and flour and smoking long before people did that. And he didn't live as long as George Burns. Jack LaLanne came from a family where there was a lot of early death from heart disease, and that's part of why he actually became, quote, so much into fitness and health. So the point is that he couldn't really, like, run away from his history. He probably lived a lot longer because of his lifestyle. But here we have George Burns, who also was a comedian, and sense of humor is a huge contributor to aging well. Finding humor in stuff and not taking stuff so seriously, correct?
No, that's so true.
That's why I use this title for my book, right? It's Pandemic, Schmandemic. It's not 100% horrible. I mean, yes, it's been horrible for some people, but the whole concept of seeing something as 100% negative is something you're going to find more in younger adults than seniors. And you're a great example. You're talking about even all that you went through with being a caregiver and losing a family member and the impact on you. It wasn't 100% negative.
That's true, Dr. Max. I tell people in my group, I even say it on podcast, you have to have a sense of humor, whether you're a caregiver or not. But definitely as a caregiver, you need to have a sense of humor. Mine got a little dark and twisted because I had to adjust. My husband would be cursing me out one minute and telling me how great I am the next. I couldn't take it personal, and you have to laugh because what else can you do? Or you laugh through your tears, and you laugh and cry at the same time. But it's a mindset. I think it's a mindset with people. I'm not going to let this defeat me. I'm going to go on, and I'm going to live my life because life is for living. And since my husband was only 66 when he died, my brother was 67, there's not a minute to waste. We have to enjoy each and every day and try to find the positive in it and the humor and the joy.
And that's what you find in the really old people, right, when they want to ask them negative questions, these people, the centenarians in their hundreds or super centenarians over 110, like you've lost children or the global warming or all this kind of stuff, and they look at the interviewers and say, why do I want to think about that? This could be my last day. I want to be happy. I want to be looking at all the new technology. I was saying this program, we're going to have this new telescope that's going to be able to tell us about galaxies and whatever. And these really, really old people are so into positive future things. And they see no value in literally taking like their last day to be negative or to be what some people call loyal to your suffering, right, that you go back and say, oh, this was so horrible what I went through, et cetera, et cetera. It's really hard to find depression in people over 100. Really hard.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm also thinking of Don Rickles, who was very spry.
Another comedian,
Yes, very spry at, 90, no script. He never did a script. It was always at the top of his head. Mel Brooks, and he's still alive.
Book out. Same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
And Carl Reiner, right?
Yes.
In their 90s, right? Again, that they enjoyed being comics. And that says a lot, right, about having that sense of humor and not taking things so seriously.
Yes. So good to talk to you, Dr. Max. I want to thank you for coming on, Dr. Max Fuhrmann. Thank you. Thank you for what you do to help others. And I really want to encourage my audience to really go on Dr. Max's website. Please read the blog because it will have information about Dr. Max Fuhrmann. And I want to thank Jeannie White, station manager, who produces the show, writes the blog, our CEO, Lillian Caldwell, Passion World Talk Radio Network, who makes this all possible. And I want to thank you, the listeners, for listening. Please share this podcast to help other people. If you missed any of this podcast, you can catch it again wherever you hear podcasts. It's free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy. I'm on Spotify, Spreaker, CastBox, just to name some. And you know what? It's a mindset, people. Get out, exercise, enjoy the fresh air, and just live in the now, I say, but have your eye on the future. And it's a mindset. If you're a caregiver, look yourself in the mirror and pat yourself on the back. You're doing a good job, or you did a good job. And I just want to encourage everyone to be kind and to find joy. And I know sometimes it's tough, but there is joy. And again, I want to thank Cherie Akir for arranging this interview. So this is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy at Passion World Talk Radio Network. Until we chat again, happy holidays, everybody, or have a peaceful one. Bye-bye now.